The story isn't over yet. Want to know what happens next between Claire and Ethan? Watch the full story to find out how this complicated situation unfolds and what shocking twists await. The tension in the house had been building for weeks, unspoken but palpable. Claire had married Daniel 2 years ago, blending their lives into a picture-perfect family. Yet beneath the surface, the dynamics were far more complicated, especially with Daniel's son, Ethan, now 21 and living at home after college. It started with fleeting glances, stolen moments of eye contact that lingered just a bit too long. Claire knew it was wrong to feel this way about her stepson, but Ethan's charm and confidence were hard to ignore. For his part, Ethan couldn't deny the allure of Claire, graceful, confident, and far younger than most stepmothers he had imagined growing up. One evening, Daniel announced he had an overnight work trip. After dinner, Claire cleaned the kitchen while Ethan lounged on the couch. The silence between them felt heavy, and every accidental brush of their hands as they passed plates was charged with something neither of them wanted to admit. After the dishes were done, Claire went upstairs, telling herself to stop overthinking. She took a shower to clear her head, the sound of water drowning out her thoughts. Wrapping herself in a towel, she reached for the bathroom door, only to find it locked from the outside. Panic flickered, then confusion. "Ethan?" she called. The lock clicked, and the door opened slightly. Ethan stood there, his face unreadable. "Sorry, I thought no one was in here," he said, his voice tight. Claire froze, clutching the towel around her. "It's fine," she managed, though her pulse quickened. Neither moved, the moment stretching unnaturally long. Then Ethan stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "You didn't seem fine downstairs," he said softly, his eyes searching hers. Claire's breath hitched. "Ethan, this is inappropriate," she whispered, though her words lacked conviction. He moved closer, the small space of the washroom amplifying his presence. "It's just us tonight," he said, his voice low. "No one has to know." Her resolve wavered as he reached out, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. She didn't pull away. The intensity in his gaze was magnetic, pulling her towards something she knew was forbidden but irresistible. "I can't," she murmured, even as she leaned slightly into his touch. "Then tell me to leave," Ethan challenged, his lips mere inches from hers. Claire didn't answer. Instead, she closed the distance between them, their lips meeting in a rush of pent-up desire. The towel slipped as his hands found her waist, pulling her closer. The sound of water dripping from the faucet filled the room as their forbidden embrace deepened. The world outside the washroom faded, replaced by the heat of the moment and the thrill of breaking every rule they knew. When they finally pulled apart, their breaths were ragged. Claire stepped back, clutching the edge of the sink. "This can't happen again," she said, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. Ethan smirked, his confidence undiminished. "We'll see," he said, before slipping out of the washroom, leaving Claire alone to face the reflection of her guilt and the undeniable spark that now connected them. Claire stood frozen by the sink, her damp skin still warm from the shower, but her heart raced for entirely different reasons. Ethan's footsteps echoed faintly as he left the washroom, and she leaned forward, gripping the edge of the counter to steady herself. She looked into the mirror, her reflection accusing her with flushed cheeks and wide eyes. What the hell just happened? The rational part of her brain screamed to lock the door and forget everything. But the lingering tingle from his touch made it impossible to dismiss. With a deep breath, she wrapped herself in her towel again, gathering what composure she could before stepping out of the washroom. Ethan was lounging on the couch in the living room, his feet propped up on the coffee table. The television was on, but his eyes flicked toward her as soon as she appeared. His lips quirked into a small, knowing smile that made her pulse quicken. "All freshened up?" he asked, his tone light but teasing. She ignored the comment, heading toward the stairs. "I'm going to bed," she said curtly, hoping to end the interaction before it spiraled again. But as she ascended the stairs, she could feel his gaze following her, burning into her back. That night, sleep was elusive. Claire tossed and turned, her thoughts consumed by Ethan. She hated herself for how much she had enjoyed the kiss, the thrill of breaking rules. Her rational side screamed at her, reminding her of Daniel, her husband, Ethan's father. But another side of her, one she didn't want to acknowledge, wondered what might happen if she let herself cross that boundary again. The next morning, Claire hoped the tension from the previous night would dissipate. She prepared breakfast, determined to act normal. Ethan walked into the kitchen, shirtless, his sweatpants hanging low on his hips. Claire's heart skipped a beat despite herself. "Morning," he said, his tone casual. But the way his eyes lingered on her hinted at something far less innocent. "Morning," she replied stiffly, focusing on flipping the pancakes. Ethan leaned against the counter, far too close. "You didn't lock the bathroom door last night,"
he said, a playful smirk tugging at his lips.
Claire's grip tightened on the spatula. "That was an accident," she said, avoiding his gaze. "Was it?" he asked, his voice dropping slightly. She turned to glare at him, but her annoyance faltered when she saw the glint of mischief in his eyes. "Ethan, we're not talking about this," she said firmly. "Okay," he said, raising his hands in mock surrender. "But for the record, it didn't seem like you hated it." Before she could respond, he grabbed a pancake from the plate and sauntered out of the kitchen, leaving her flustered and fuming. As the day went on, Claire tried to avoid Ethan, but the house wasn't big enough for her to escape entirely. He seemed to delight in testing her resolve, brushing past her in the hallway, lingering in the doorway whenever she entered a room, and finding excuses to stand just a little too close. By evening, she was at her wits' end. She retreated to her bedroom, locking the door and hoping to find some peace. But peace was short-lived. A knock came at the door, light but insistent. "Claire," Ethan's voice called softly. She hesitated, her heart pounding. "What do you want?" "I need to talk to you," he said. "Go away, Ethan," she replied, her voice wavering. But the door handle turned, and she realized too late that she hadn't locked it properly. Ethan stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "Ethan, you can't just—" "Relax," he said, his tone disarming. "I'm not here to cause trouble." She crossed her arms, trying to appear stern despite her racing pulse. "Then what are you here for?" He stepped closer, his expression softening. "To apologize? For last night." Claire blinked, caught off guard. "You are—" He nodded. "I shouldn't have pushed you like that." It wasn't fair. His sincerity disarmed her. She sighed, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "Thank you," she said. "But," he added, his gaze locking onto hers, "I can't stop thinking about it." Her breath hitched as he stepped closer, the space between them vanishing. "Ethan," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me you don't feel the same," he said, his voice low and earnest. She opened her mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come. And then, before she could stop herself, she was kissing him again. The washroom became their secret meeting place. The thrill of stolen moments heightened every interaction. Ethan would find excuses to accidentally run into her while she showered. And Claire, despite her better judgment, stopped locking the door altogether. One evening, as she stood by the mirror brushing her hair, Ethan slipped inside. "You're getting bold," she said, raising an eyebrow at him. He grinned. You don't seem to mind. He stepped behind her, his hands brushing against her shoulders as he met her gaze in the mirror. You're beautiful, he said softly. Claire's cheeks flushed, but she didn't pull away. You're trouble, she replied, though her tone was more teasing than accusatory. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Maybe, but you seem to like trouble. Their moments together were filled with a mix of passion, humor, and guilt. Ethan's playful nature often diffused the tension, making Claire laugh even as she tried to maintain her boundaries. One afternoon, he cornered her in the washroom, holding up her favorite shampoo bottle. You know, he said, I think I've been using too much of this. My hair smells like lavender now. Claire rolled her eyes, trying to snatch the bottle from him. Give me that.
He held it out of reach, grinning. Make me.
Despite herself, she laughed, lunging for the bottle. The playful scuffle ended with Ethan pinning her against the counter, their laughter fading as their gazes locked. You drive me crazy, she admitted softly. Good, he replied, leaning in to kiss her. The affair escalated, each encounter pushing the boundaries further. Yet, amidst the passion, there were moments of levity that reminded Claire why she was drawn to Ethan in the first place. His humor, his charm, and his ability to make her feel alive in a way she hadn't in years. But the guilt was always there, lurking in the background. Claire knew they couldn't keep this up forever. Sooner or later, someone would notice, and the fragile life they had built would come crashing down. For now, though, she allowed herself to savor the stolen moments, the laughter, the touches, the kisses knowing they were fleeting but unable to resist the pull. The line between right and wrong had long since blurred, and Claire found herself wondering if she even wanted to find her way back.